The Vikings were terrified of the night. They were some of the most savage, brutal raiders in history. And yet, they were so scared that when someone died, the family wouldn't carry the body out through the front door. Instead, they would smash a hole straight through the wall, shove it out through the gap, and seal the hole shut behind it. They were terrified that if it left through the door, it would remember the way and come back. Something out there in the dark scared them more than any army ever could. But that same darkness they were so afraid of is exactly where a handful of scattered farmers turn themselves into the most dangerous people on Earth. Up at the top of the world, winter doesn't just bring early sunsets. It practically erases the sun. Imagine the sun going down in autumn and not truly coming back until spring. And it wasn't just dark. It was deadly. Inland on a clear night, the cold could drop past -30 Celsius, more than 20 below zero Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill you before morning. So for half the year, a whole family was sealed inside one dark, smoky room while the night stretched on with no end in sight. And in that kind of dark, for that long, it gets very easy to believe something is outside. Something trying to get in. So they told stories. And the very first one explained where all that darkness came from. They believed two enormous wolves were chasing the sun across the sky, and that one day they would catch it, swallow it whole, and drown the world in darkness forever. Every winter, as the light bled away, it really did look like the wolves were winning. But the wolves were just one of the things out there. Beyond the firelight, the dark belonged to the trolls. Giant lumbering things strong enough to crush a man. And they owned the night, because the one thing a troll could not survive was daylight. The first touch of the rising sun would turn it to solid stone. So when the dark came down, the smart ones stayed inside and waited for the sun. But you didn't even have to go outside to be in danger. The worst things came for you indoors while you slept. They called it the Mara. It crept into the house at night, sat on your chest while you slept, and crushed the breath out of you with terrible dreams. You couldn't move, you couldn't scream. You'd just wake in the dark, gasping. It's almost certainly what we now call sleep paralysis, that jolt of waking up frozen, certain something is crouching on your chest. And Mara is exactly where we get the word nightmare. One old tale says a king of Sweden was crushed to death by a Mara in his sleep, sent by a witch who wanted him gone. And it didn't only come for people. Farmers would find their horses in the morning soaked in sweat and shaking, manes tangled into knots. But the Mara wasn't the thing they feared most. It was a dead body that climbed back out of the grave and walked. They called it a draugr. Not a see-through ghost, but the actual corpse, swollen and rotting and impossibly strong. It could crush a horse, and no man alive could fight it off. The worst of them rotted the land around them. In one saga, a draugr grew so foul that birds flying over its grave fell dead out of the air. Cattle died in the fields, and an entire valley had to be abandoned. And they rose at night. Worst of all, in the dead of winter. A bolted door wouldn't stop one. They could smash their way into a house and drag you out. Now remember the body they shoved out through that hole in the wall. A dead man who found his way home. To put a draugr down for good, you had to dig up the grave, cut off its head, and burn the whole body to ash. The most famous of them was a dead shepherd named Glommer, who climbed onto the roof of the farmhouse at night and rode it, slamming his heels against the beams until the whole house shook. Anyone who met him out there either dropped dead on the spot or lost their mind. It took a legendary outlaw named Grettir to wrestle him to the ground in the dark. But as Glommer lay dying, a cloud slid off the moon. The light caught his rolling dead eyes, and Grettir froze. With his last breath, Glommer cursed him, that he would be afraid of the dark for the rest of his life. And it worked. Grettir, the man who killed the monster, could never bear to be alone in the dark again. But not every Viking ran from the dark. Some of them went looking for it. They even had a name for it, Udisetta, which just means sitting out. A seeress was a woman the Vikings believed could see the future. She would walk out alone at night onto a burial mound and sit there in the freezing dark for hours, trying to wake the dead and pull secrets and prophecy out of them. People believed in it so completely that the law eventually banned it by name, calling it sitting out to wake up the trolls. So while everyone else barricaded their doors against the dead, she was out on a grave in the pitch black, trying to call them up. That same darkness, the very thing that terrified them, is also where they became impossible to beat. Because when the fire was high and the ale was flowing, that same room turned loud and wild. And they passed those long nights doing something that sounds straight out of today. They had rap battles. They called it flyting, where two people would stand up and hurl insults at each other, back and forth, in verse made up on the spot. In the most famous match of all, the trickster god Loki crashes a feast and tears into every god in the room one by one. He even accuses Odin, the king of the gods, of practicing women's magic and creeping around disguised as a witch. And they went for blood, your courage, your looks, whether you were even a real man at all. In a world where your reputation was the only thing you truly owned, freezing up with nothing to fire back could shame you for years. The Vikings respected a quick tongue almost as much as a quick blade. And once a year, all of it boiled over into the biggest feast of the year. They called it Yule, the same word we still use at Christmas. It ran for days, drowning in food and drink, at the exact time of year when food was hardest to find. They sacrificed animals to the gods and marked the walls with the blood to buy themselves a good year ahead. And at the peak of it, a man would lay his hand on a sacred boar and swear an oath out loud in front of the whole room to win a certain battle or to kill a certain man. And once it was said, there was no taking it back. A hall full of warriors would talk themselves into next summer's raids in the dead of winter, months before a single ship ever left the shore. The raids that terrified all of Europe didn't begin out on the water. They began in the dark, around a fire, with a cup of ale and a promise. But the oaths were still just words. Something had to carry all those men across the open sea and turn those words into blood and plunder. And the thing that did it is the last thing you would ever guess. Picture a Viking longship. You probably picture the wood, the carved dragon head, the long rows of oars. But the wood isn't what carried that ship across the ocean. The sail did. And the sail was made of wool, which means without a room full of women spinning in the dark, there is no Viking age. Just angry men with axes stuck on the shore. A single sail could swallow the wool of more than 1,000 sheep. Every bit of that wool had to be cleaned, combed, and spun into thread by hand. Then it was woven into cloth on a loom taller than a person. When researchers added it all up, the woodwork, the part we always picture, turned out to be the easy part. The cloth took about 30 times longer. And the slowest part wasn't the weaving, it was the spinning. Spinning it all by hand was so slow that, all added up, the sail for a single warship came to about 50 years of work. No single person could ever do that. It took dozens of women working together just to finish one. Indoors, in the dark, all winter long. It was so completely women's work that the word spinster, which now means an unmarried woman, back then meant nothing more than a woman who spins. Take away the long ships and the legends, and you are left with something very ordinary. A room full of people around a fire, scared of the dark. That was the Vikings, every single night. One of the most frightening people in the world, fighting their own fears, the same as anyone else.